Hey there, how's it going? I hope I have a better quality of video for you for this lecture today. And this lecture is basically just going to be covering a lot of different things that we can do to fix things, to make things work for us. A lot of times when we're doing recording and production, well, quite frankly, we're given a bunch of tracks and we're sort of said, hey, make these things work, make these do something other than what they are doing right now. Or a lot of times we have to make things more quantized, make things more. A lot of times we have to do more to something. Here's a bunch of different things that I find I have to do a lot of times when I'm making records. And when it comes down to the mix, or between the production usually and the mix down situation, there's a bunch of stuff that has to be done to everything to kind of get it into that place where then when it's mixed, it's a lot easier to handle. So the first thing I want to go into today is basically what happens if we want to start from a sample. And there's a great sample that we want to use, or a couple of samples. And let's say we want to make those samples work together in an environment, base our tempo maps to that sample, or conform those samples to a tempo map. I want to show you briefly exactly how we can do that with Pro Tools, because it's really pretty cool. It's pretty easy to work with using two different things called Identify Beat and Elastic Audio. And these have their analogs and other DAWs, but this is what we have for this for Pro Tools. So right now I have a session. I went ahead and pulled in this Al Green tune and actually I also have another sample from another Al Green tune. And I just decided, hey, I'm gonna rip off Al Green here. I'm not gonna rip off Al Green. I can't do that. Wouldn't want to do that. I have permission to do this, and I've gone ahead and gotten this clearance and gone through the process of doing this. So I have this permission. I've paid the money. I'll pay future royalties, firstborn and what have you. But anyway, so I've gone through all that process. I've got this track, and I found my sample that I want to use. So anyways, here's the track, and let me just play a little bit of Driving Wheel by Al Green here from the top.
My baby don't have to work. She don't have to rob or steal. My baby don't have to.
Oh, well, that's enough of that. Let me just show you the sample that I want to use. We can just put videos up and listen to Al Green all day and call it a day. I'll just give everybody an A and we'll just have a great time doing this class, but no, we can't do that. All right, here's basically what I wanted to do. This right here.
Yeah, it's all right. Baby, thank you, boy.
See, I like that little 4-bar phrase right there. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a bit in Pro Tools. I'm going to click at the beginning of this sample. Just before the transient, I'm going to highlight up until my other marker here and the very beginning of that transient. So I've got that highlight. And then I'm going to use Command E, which is what I'd use to isolate something in the middle of something. So Command E. And boom, I've got my sample isolated pretty much. And then let's check that loop. See how it sounds.
Yeah,
See if
it's
it
all right.
loops around pretty well.
Baby, thank you, boy. Yeah, it's all right.
All right, works for me. Let's just say I like that. I'm good with it. So let's get rid of everything else on either side of it. And actually, I'm going to just Command X that real quick. Go back to the top of the song. And pop it in over here. Then I got this other sample from another tune that I got. Let me just take those all the way to 0 and let's get in here. Okay, so Driving Wheel, I've got that for that's going to be my sample that I want to start with. So I have a choice here that I want to make. I can either figure out what the tempo of this is and then make that the tempo of the song, or I can find out what the tempo of this is and find out what's close to that and have it conform to that. So first things first, let's do what we call Identify Beat. This is super useful for lots of things. If we have a sample we're basing our thing on, we don't want to change a thing about it. We like the tempo exactly where it is. So what we can do is we can do a thing called Identify Beat. And the way we use this is come up to Event, Identify Beat, or it's actually Command I if you want. And we'll open that up. So it's the time signature is 4/4. We counted 4 on the floor, and it's a 4-bar phrase. So it's so I want this to end at the beginning of bar 5. And right now, in the tempo that I have at 120 here, I should say it this way. Basically, it's pretty close, you know. So I'm going to go ahead and make that. This should be 1, and that automatically makes those zeros. So okay, so that should be the beginning of bar 5 at the end of that sample. I'll hit OK, and you can see up here the map went ahead and conformed to that. And let's look over here in the corner here, and we look and we see that our tempo is 104.6208. That's what that sample, if I just have that sample as 4 bars, that's the tempo it's at. This whole tune is now got a tempo map at 104.6208 beats per minute. And now I can do MIDI, I can go and do everything to this. And what I can do is I can take this and I go up here to the top here and I right click on my drawer tool, and that brings me to loop. I'll click on the loop and I'll zoom out a little bit. And I'll grab the edge of that and I can just loop that, loop that, loop that, loop that, loop that all day long. Cool. All right, and I'm in 104.6208 for my tempo. Maybe that's not such a super great idea. I mean, I don't see any real big problem with that, but it actually probably makes pretty good sense to just round it off to 105 or 104, right? I don't really have a real big dog in the hunt saying I've got to have it at 104.6208. So let's go ahead and conform this to, let's say, 104. It's not quite as easy as it is with Ableton, where Ableton you can just, when you just sort of pull it in there and you change the tempo, it's just going to do it for you. In this case, we have to do a little dipsy doodle here with Pro Tools, and let's zoom in a little bit. We use a thing called elastic audio. Let's go ahead and set this tempo. So I've got to go up here to Event, Tempo Operations, Constant. So selection, actually, let's say start from 1, 1, and let's just say at least a 5. But if I don't check preserve tempo after selection, it's going to keep this tempo through all the way, whatever. So I'm just going to go ahead and say 104, make that a 0, just straight up 104, apply. Now we got 104 across the board, and you can see over here at bar 5, there's a discrepancy with this. So we want to conform that to that point. In this case, we'll use a thing called elastic audio. Elastic audio is over here. If you look over here, and there's a little sort of a reverse triangle next to this blue dot. And if we click on that, we see we have some options. We got polyphonic, rhythmic, monophonic, and vari-speed. Vari-speed is self-explanatory. If I open this up, it will actually pitch it down, just like it would just pitch. It would go down in pitch as I opened it up. Monophonic and rhythmic are for, again, if you have a mono, sort of like a saxophone, and we want to do something with it to that. Rhythmic if we're doing it to a drum thing. Polyphonic, we want to do it if we have something like this, where we have a pre-recorded track where there's chords, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Polyphonic sort of the upper realm of elastic audio, so we definitely need to do polyphonic for this because it's a complete sample. So let's go to polyphonic, and it lights up over here. Then we got to go back up to our drawer tool, right click on it again. We go down to TCE. So let's listen to this sample real quick, just as it is, before we do anything to it.
Yeah, it's all right. Baby, thank you, boy.
Okay, now I'm going to conform it using the tool. Make sure it's on TCE. Yes, it is. Okay. And we'll conform it now.
Yeah, it's all right. Baby, thank you, boy.
And we won't really hear a difference because it was very, very subtle. Because what happens is that when we go into time compression and expansion, it chops up our track into ticks instead of samples. It moves everything in terms of the tempo. It's like we're just changing the tempo, and it's MIDI information. It just moves everything, and then it crossfades in between all the parts, very, very subtly. So it's really clever, but that's how the time compression and expansion works. For the most part, it's a bit more intense than that, but that gives you some idea. All right, so I've got this one already. And then it turns out I had this other sample that I found that I thought was kind of close, that I really liked. And this is this other sample. Let me play it for you that I found.
Well, look at here.
So I decided what I wanted to do is have 4 bars of this top one and then 4 bars of this bottom one. And then have that, I'm going to build the tune off of that. So let me check this bottom one. And as it turns out, it's pretty close to this tempo already, to 104. Let's look at the back end of this thing. And we have to pull this out right here, and we have to bring it to this far. So let me put this one into polyphonic also. And let me make sure that I'm on this tool. And it's the TCE tool. Yes, it is. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, yeah, pull it out, and there it is. And that wasn't even going to, we probably wouldn't even notice that, but now I've got 2 samples. Actually, we can play them together, and they'll probably be a little weird, but they'll overlay.
That's all right.
Yeah, so they actually kind of work in a way. So I'm pretty sure I can now use these as my foundation. I'm going to give myself 14 bars of this first one. By the way, let's see what happens if I really radically time expand this. I think we're not going to be happy with it.
That's all right.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. All right, let's get this back where it was supposed to be. There you go.
That's all right.
Okay, now let me put this back into, right click on this and back into loop mode. And now I can go ahead and go, okay, 8 bars, 12 bars, 16 bars. I can grab this guy here, bring him over here. And I'll go ahead and do the same with that. I'll loop it, make sure it's on loop here. Yep, it's on loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we'll just do 4 of those. Anyway, so let's just hear how the transition sounds on this, and then we'll get off of this real quick. We'll just do that.
Thank you, Mom. Well, look at here.
Anyways, so now you can see how we can bring samples together. We can use identify beat, or we can use Elastic Audio. We can use a combination of the two to sort of get our samples into the tempo situation that we want them to be in. Another thing we did sort of touch on briefly in class was beat detective. How can we make our drums become quantized, to be quantized drums? So sometimes you find the need to do that. I don't usually, but a lot of times, especially if we're dealing with situations where we're doing a lot of stuff with sequencing and having a very, very rhythmic pulse stuff going to dance music, modern day dance music, if we really want to get specific with our tempos and have everything ticky-boo, sometimes we want our drums to be in perfect time. So sometimes we'll have a drummer play, and then we'll go, hey, we want to quantize the drummer. We want to, what we sort of call in Nashville, pocket the drummer, which is something that we all had to sort of learn how to do, because we figured if we were all going to be working in Nashville, we had to fix a bunch of stupid drums, man, because that's what they like to do. They get drummers to come in and play the stuff, and then they quantize the drummers. Maybe you have a drum track that you just want it to be in tempo, and it really wasn't. But maybe you did sort of play it to a click, but it's just moving around, or you played it to a sample and it's moving around, and you just want to kind of get it in there. So let's get back to this session. This is a drum session that we did a while ago. So I got a couple kicks, I got a snare top and bottom, I've got an overhead and a hat. No tom-toms on this particular track. Here's the problem though, it was played to a track that was sort of built, that was sort of sent in, that was kind of done to a click, but it was moving around a little bit. Be that as it may, I got this drum track played to something, and now I have this drum track all by itself, and I want to sort of lock it in. And it's already a pretty good lock-in track. I'll just play a little sample of it here. You may have heard this one before. Let me take the click out. It's our good old "don't do the crime if you can't do the time" beat. Yes! You thought you were going to not hear this one again. Oh, that's so, my friend. Right now, it sort of moves back and forward in time. In fact, when I was trying to figure out what tempo this thing is actually in, I was using identify beat, and I found myself having to sort of go start the first 13 bars, figure out, okay, I do identify beat for the first 13 bars, and then move up forward. And I finally, though, was able to figure out that the end of the song was 97 bars. I then just identify beat for that. If I play some of this, you'll see how the click is just sort of moving. It moves against the click a bit. Like this. That part's a little ahead of it, or behind it. So it's kind of near. Basically, this click, though, represents what this tune is supposed to end up being quantized to. When we're finished, this drum track should lock into that click right there. All the drums, the whole pattern, everything about this should lock into that. So that's what our goal is. We decided that we want, in our wild wisdom, we decided we needed to do this. So here we are doing it. We're going to use the thing called Beat Detective. So let's highlight everything that we want to use here in our session. Let's make sure we get everybody here all the way up to bar 99. So let's make sure we get bar 99 all the way to the beginning. So let's zoom out just for a sec. All right, so now we're going to go up here to Beat Detective. Beat Detective gives you this suite of tools right here. These 5 things. Don't always need to use all of them, but we definitely want to use definitely need to use the last 3. The second one, groove temperate extraction. What that can be used for is, if, for instance, if we have a tune that has a certain groove to it, we want to have all of our MIDI conform to that groove, we can use this to sort of figure out what that groove is, and then that becomes the MIDI template. So bar beat marker generation. Let's just go ahead and check that out. We're going to capture this selection, and that tells us bar 1 to bar 99, 1. Time signatures 4/4. And right here is where we sort of decide where it's going to be 16th notes. I mean, that's pretty much our rhythmic template. 16th is kind of our fastest stuff. So we need to do an analyzation here, and it's done it. And now this is lit up in sensitivity. We can now turn the sensitivity up, and as you can see, it goes purple real fast. Let's zoom in a little bit and see what the heck that means here. Let's pull this down here where it can make some more sense. All right, I'm zooming in. And this is where you can kind of figure out what's your resolution of everything that's going to get moved around here. So obviously, right now it's just giving me the kick drum like beats. So let's zip this up and get these other ones here, and let's get those too. So let's make sure we're resolving and getting all of the stuff that's happening here. And we scroll through, and we can see that our sensitivity is capturing everything that we need to capture. It's not getting anything crazy here. So all right, that's pretty much what we need to have here. Let's zoom in a little more. Yeah, it's capturing this little guy here. This is capturing these small things, but they're all going to line up together because we're grouped. We're going to be moving all drums together because we have to. We can't do individual drums against each other. We will start to have phasing issues, because keep in mind, all these microphones are picking up all the other instruments and the drums. The kick drum is picking up the snare is picking up the overhead is picking up all these microphones are all picking up the same thing from different distances. So we now have our analysis figured out. We've got sub beats here, not just bars and beats. So let's skip the groove template extraction. We're going to go to clip separation. This is going to make separate clips out of all of these. So we want to put a little bit of trigger pad, maybe about 5 milliseconds. Trigger pad at the beginning of it. All right, maybe 10. Let's make that 10. And when we hit separate, it's going to happen. Here we go. Burp. As you can see, everything has been separated. We got them all separated. So now at this point, we got multiple clips going all over the place. Well, now with the clip conform, we switch to this next thing. And this is going to now quantize all of these little pieces. And we can decide on a strength. We can have it be, we can't have it so it's not 100% to the mark. We can have it maybe 90, 95%. We can add an element of swing. We can have an exclude within a certain percent of strength. So this gives us a few more quantization options. I'm not going to try to swing anything or do a strength here. We're just going to go straight forward with it with 16th notes. And we'll hit conform. Bang. And you see how everything all of a sudden shifted real quick. Now let's zoom in a little bit. And we can see things have been separated. We've got some space between some things here. All of a sudden, some things have been overlapped. Everything's been sort of jostled around and put into position. We go down to edit smoothing next, the fifth of our things. Just fill the gaps, or fill and crossfade. And we want to fill in all those open spaces and then crossfade between all these little gaps. So we're going to just sort of do stitching. We're going to stitch all the little gaps together here. So we will hit smooth, and we'll zoom in now and take a look and see what happened. As you can see, we've got all these little crossfades in front of where everything was filled in, and then the crossfades were filled in. So now what should happen is when I play this back, hopefully it'll sound like everything's been quantized. It'll conform perfectly to the click. Pull back a little bit here. When looking at it, we see all these edits everywhere. And let's sort of check this out with the click track, sort of see if we've made it happen. Let's play a little bit and I'll take it out. And it used to be all over the place, and now it's locking in with the click. Let's look up here a little bit, maybe about here. Still locked in. So yeah, we've managed to get this this track locked in with the click. What's kind of cool about it is that it was a performed drum track, so it has a lot of the dynamics of the performed drum track, the way that things are certain, are not hit all in perfect levels, and the way the instruments sound at different levels when they're hit, but everything is quantized as if it was a drum machine. So Beat Detective is pretty good for that kind of thing. If you're into that sort of thing, you can do that with any kind of other performance, not just drums. There's just some more stuff about drums coming up. Hey, you know what? While we got this drum track up here, why not go ahead and do a quick review of how we make our little drum triggers, so we can have drum triggers, so we can fix drum problems. Because you know what? I got news for you guys. There's one of the little dirty little secrets of recording and production is a lot of the guys, once they start mixing the record and they get their drum sounds up and they've compressed them and they put some EQ on them and they do all this cool stuff. And once they've done all this stuff, guess what? They're also reaching for some samples, and they're putting those samples in there too. And you know what? You can do that too. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody does that. So you can be one of everybody if you want to too. The down and dirty way to do it in Pro Tools, those of you with Ableton, of course, have audio to MIDI. But Pro Tools, we have a little cheat for that. So let me show you how that works. Getting back over here, here's that snare that we just sort of turned into a very nicely isolated snare drum part. Let's get a nice kick happening, or just maybe some kind of ridiculous kick. So we got a kick drum. So the first order of business we're going to do is we're going to get a track, instrument track. Oh yeah, let me show you this. Stereo instrument track. Go down to instrument. I've got battery, which is great because it's a cool sample playing thing, and you can switch out samples real easy. Got a lot of great stuff going on. So here's battery. Let's just sort of pick something cool, like I don't know. How about Dubway Kid? Let's see what that's like. Let's just go with that kick for now. I can always switch it out later. Once I've placed my trigger in the right place, it's going to be there, and I can just switch drums at will. Of course, obvious. And I'm going to put it in the general MIDI drum position of C1. All right, batteries in the picture. So let's get over here. Now, first of all, I've got to go ahead and make the trigger itself. So let's open up this. I'm going to get my pencil tool. I'm going to pop it in here. And I'm going to go down to C1 down here. And if I click on C1 right there, you can see I'm playing C1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this, I'm going to go into grid mode. I'm going to place this right at the top of a beat. Boom. And what I'm also going to do, I'm going to open up down here in the bottom left-hand corner of the track where this little sort of triangular icon is. Click on that. That opens up the lollipop stand. You always want to know about your lollipop stand. Open that up. When you pencil in a note like this, it's going to basically default it right here to 80. So let's go ahead and jack this all the way up to 127. Get the fullness of it, and then what we can do is with some of the smaller ones, we'll go back through it and we'll just sort of adjust them so that, as you can see, where there's bigger ones and then there's smaller ones that sort of set them up. We can actually redesign this dynamically if we want to, but let's go ahead and give them full blasters to start with. So once we've created the MIDI note and we put it on an exact spot, let's go ahead and we're going to actually highlight that, and we're going to make sure that our group is not together here. We're going to now not copy it, but we're going to command exit. So we're just going to cut it. So we've got it. Once we've cut it, now we're going to make sure that, again, if we haven't made this already, we've got our new instrument track and our track that we want to have a trigger on together and grouped. And again, we do command G. We group these two together. I've already done that here. So we've got these grouped. Now, I may have noticed, I think I mentioned earlier, we have right here, I'm going to turn it on and off. This button here, this is called tab to transient. And when this button is on, and it's on right now, that means, for instance, if I put my cursor on this track and I hit the tab button, it will then move to each transient in succession. And I can go down the line. So this really helps us when we want to make these triggers, because we want to put triggers on each of these transients. So I'm going to put this on before the first one. I'll tab to it. I've got my group on. So over here, I've got this A to Z lit up, which means I am in keyboard control, which means I don't have to even do command V to paste it. All I have to do is hit V. So all I have to do is go down the line and hit tab to the transient that I want to go ahead and put a trigger on, and then hit V. And I have to make sure I skip the ones I don't want them on. So this is what's going to happen. So I've tabbed to this. I'll hit V. Tab to that one. V. V. Not that. That one. And this takes, this can take about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. Let's see if I can get how far I get through it while I'm talking to you here. But anyways, you can go all the way down the line. Just make sure you don't put them where you don't need them. I don't think that needs to be there. And then once you've placed them, and let's say I placed all of them by now, let's go ahead and just hear what this sounds like here as it is. And they're right there where they're supposed to be. And I can go ahead and loop this, and I can switch some different drum knobs. So yeah, obviously it becomes really easy to just swap out drum sounds and when you put your drum MIDI on C1, that's the general MIDI spot for kick drum. So pretty much any drum machine sample or patch thing that you have is going to cough up a kick drum on that note. So that's why I always put them on C1. Anyways, you can do the same thing with the snare drum. And we would do the snare drum with, and the snare drums are always on E1. So you do the same thing with snare drums. And you can do them with tom-toms. And so it takes a little while. Once you've sort of created the MIDI note, made the little group, and got your started to tap the transient, you just sort of go down the line. You can just pop them in there. But once it's done, and then you've got real amazing control. And of course, then you want to go through these and make sure that your lollipops line up with. Obviously, we don't want to have all the kick drums be just all thundering up at the same level. We want these to reflect a certain amount of humanity. So it does take a little time. Good things do take time. Make sure all the strong ones are loud, the weaker ones are softer. Yeah, just make sure that it reflects the performance is best, unless you want to try to perfect the performance and make it sound more machine-like. But if you really just want to make this enhance the drums, then you need to take the time to do this, and it's time well spent. We've found all kinds of ways that we can do stuff to drums, mess it up real good, fixing things, though a lot of times it's fixing things, because let's face it, a lot of times we don't always get the best drums and the best drummers, and we need to do a lot of things to get the drums right. So this is a lot of stuff we can do here, but also stuff that can be fun and can make your stuff sound better. Yeah, when it comes to fixing things, sometimes what we also need to employ is a gate or an expander. Because a lot of times we need to sort of clean up some things between events that we have. I mean, a lot of times with drums, we'll gate certain drums, so because obviously we have multiple microphones. I've got a microphone in the snare drum is going to pick up tom-toms, is going to pick up other stuff. So if I just want that microphone to pick up nothing but the snare drum, I might gate it so that when it hits, it opens up, and then when it gets to a certain point in the threshold, it stops and clamps off, and then just waits until the next hit comes in so I can clean it. I don't have all these extra things going on. There's two ways to do that. Obviously, there is using the gate expander. Then there's also using a thing called strip silence. I'm just going to go over these two items really quick, because sometimes you find yourself needing to do this to clean things, and these are two ways to do it fairly quickly and efficiently. So I went ahead and pulled up your basic gate expander here in Pro Tools. I'm back to my old drum thing that we just had a minute ago. So I've got kicks, 2 kicks and 2 snares. Well, not physically. I mean, there's 2 mics on the kick, 2 mics on the snare. So what I'm going to do is I've got gates on all of them, because if I'm going to gate one of them, I should probably gate the other one. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to show you how to do a side chain. So what will happen is when I gate one of the kicks, it's going to open the other one exactly the same way that it opens that one. So let's look at how we would set this gate. It's very similar to the compressor. We have our 6 different parameters down here. In this case, attack and release, they're very much like we had with the compressor. How long after it hits is it going to open up the gate? And so with an attack, we want the attack to be very, very short. We want to capture the whole transient. So but we can also have it so the gate opens up after the transient, just like with the compressor, so it comes in later. So if that could be kind of cool if we wanted to have something happen and then something opens up right after that happens, and so it doesn't mask it. That could be kind of cool. We have hold, which hold it this long, 50 milliseconds before it'll start allow it go down again. So that gives you a little bit of control for how long the gate stays open. Then of course your release time is how long it takes after it gets back down the threshold for it to stop, for it to close down the gate. You can control the gate in a lot of ways here, also with the threshold. That's very important, and I'm going to show you how you do that. But we can also control the back, how this happens with the range and the ratio, and this is where your expander element happens. So we can treat this like an expander. So a 3-to-1 ratio, for instance, as it goes underneath the ratio coming back down, for every 1 dB that it comes down, it's going to drop at 3 dB. So it's the ratio. You can also really make it so it tightens up. This release time also can be controlled by the ratio here. And then we have the range, which is another element that we can introduce to this, which is kind of cool, which we can use more for, like, if we're going to use this more of a ducking thing. We can really fine tune just how much ducking is happening to this thing. When we're using this as a gate, we don't really have the range into play so much. We'll just sort of keep that all the way down, or at least a good bit. So we have the ratio and our release, which sort of helps us control how this gate's going to close. So the open is going to be pretty much instantaneous, but then how long it stays open, and then if it closes smoothly or quickly, that's what we're going to try to determine here. All right, so I got a kick drum here. Let's open this one up here. This is the kick drum I'm going to use right up here. Let's zoom in on it. But I want to get rid of this stuff here. These are the snare hits, and some of the and maybe some hi-hat hits. So I want to make it so I get just nothing but the kick drum, and just all that stuff gets left out. And I don't necessarily want to go there through this and just wipe all these things out. I could do that, but I don't have time for that. Okay, here we go with the kick going through the gate. Let's set it here properly. All right, here we go. First we gotta get this attack so it's really fast. Make sure we get the attack coming through. So we want to try not to hear that snare drum thing if possible. It looks like we're getting pretty close though. No, we're definitely not getting it now. Let me see if I can get a little longer release. A little more hold. So we've successfully isolated the kick. There's that's bypassed, but we've maintained the transient under complete control now. Okay, I've already done sort of a gate type thing to the other kick, so I'm not going to bother. You can see there's no crap on that, so we won't bother with that right now. So let's move right up to the snare drum real quick. We've gotten these guys pretty well out of the way. Let's check out our snare drum, and I've got to open and put a gate on it too. So let's go ahead and get it activated. Here's its gate. So we can hear the kick drum in there. So let's get a little clean here. All right, take it a bypass. Okay, once again we have to really make that fast attack so we don't lose the transient. So super fast attack. Let's up this a little bit and open up the hold a little bit. And the release. Oh, we get a little bit of kick there. Let's back the hold off a little more. The release. But now we're getting the snare drum pretty much. We can open this threshold to make sure we're getting nothing but that snare. Now if we open this ratio up, as you can see, if it's 1-to-1, we're not getting any stuff. If we bring this down, now it's more gradual. So that works in tandem with the release. But let's just keep this at 3-to-1 and have that work with the release time that we've got. All right, snare drum is pretty much under control. So what we'd like to do is have our bottom snare drum pretty much have its gate opened up by this snare drum. Let's go ahead and make it so that it's keying that. So how do we do that? Very simple. First of all, we need to make a quick bus to send over to it. First of all, let's assign a bus to this. So let's say bus 6. All right, bus 6. Let's activate the bus, and let's right click on it and rename it. Yeah, let's call that snare gate. Snare gate. All right, here's the new snare, and we're going to unbypass it. Now here where it says by the key, where it says no key input, let's make that our snare gate. So the snare gate from this now is going to this. And now we have to open up the key over here where it says sidechain, turn on the key. And we can make it so just the high end of this information or just the low end of this information, we can use a filter and just sort of do it that way, like for making a de-esser. That's how we would do a de-esser, for instance. But we're not doing that right at the moment. Let's go ahead and check this out, see how this is sounding. Oh yeah, I want to put this into pre-fader, so if I want to, I can have the new thing soloed and I don't end up losing it. So let's do that. Let's see here the new. Okay, here's just the new one. So again, let's open up that attack a little bit more. Let's maybe give it a little more release. Maybe less, because we're also getting that kick drum. So let's back it off a little bit. Let's hear it with the other one. All right, so we pretty well isolated those, and so they should go in pretty well Let's hear those with the overheads together now. So we still got both the kick and the snare in the overheads, but what we now have done is we've really sort of cleaned up the kick and the snare and given them so that now we don't have all these extra stuff in those tracks, and we can have more fun with them later. Another way we can do this, though, if we want to just say, you know what, screw that, let's just make this permanent, we can do a thing called strip silence. For instance, if we want to strip silence this top snare, let's do that. Let's just make it so that there's no stuff other than the snare itself. So what we do, let's light this thing up, and let's go on up to edit. And edit down here, it's Command U, strip silence. We open that up, and we get the strip silence thing here. So we want to make sure we get these ghost notes, but not the little guys. So we'll up our threshold a little bit. Minimum clip duration, we'll make those low. And we really want to just get the big ones. We don't want the little ones. We want the big ones. So let's get up high like this, because we don't want the little ones, and we'll have little extra start pads on these. And end pads. We'll go right up to the next beat. So about like that. So we look at all of these guys, and they're pretty well managed. Okay, cool. That should do a pretty good job of it. Now we hit strip, and they're all stripped out. Now the problem with this, of course, is that, as you can see, we don't have fades on any of these things. So we can listen through this and see if there's any of these that have any clicks on the end of them. And most of these will actually probably be pretty clean, actually. Every now and then we'll find we'll get a little kick on one or two of them. But that's one great way to sort of really clear them all up. So again, fixing things, getting rid of unwanted sounds on tracks. That's part of how we can do that. This is strip silence. That's another way we can do this. So yeah, there's always stuff we got to fix, and a lot of times there's stuff we have to go even deeper with fixing, and this is when we reach for the great tool called RX7 by Isotope, which I highly recommend all of you being in possession of this particular plugin if you're doing anything audio, because it really, this is your Swiss Army knife for fixing any problems that you have with your audio. I mean, one of the best things that you can do with this, for instance, is if you are a guitar player and you like to use single coil pickups and you like to use amplifiers, and you end up with this hum, and this basic, your amplifier is humming because you're cranking it up and you're getting that really sort of loud sort of hum. And you probably notice sometimes that you're playing guitar, and if you're doing it in the studio, if you rotate yourself, it goes, does that kind of thing, right? Because you have a single coil pickup, not a humbucker, and that will cause it will pick up that kind of those kind of frequencies, those problematic frequencies, and those are no longer a problem, because with RX you can just clean them right up. And that's one of the great things about it. RX is great for also if you have a sample that's a little poppy, for instance, that's got a couple of too many big pops. For instance, I've got one right here. Going back to my Al Green thing. If I want to use that set for a sample, I've got these big pops, for instance, and let's say I've got that. For instance, I've got a recording that has that kind of a thing where something interrupted the sound, and we got these kind of a pop like this stuff right here. These kind of things that happen like this. Obviously, this is a record pop that happens, because I think I got this from a record. So I think I had a couple of record pops. So let's say I got a couple of problems with problematic record pops. I've got RX to fix it with. Let me go ahead and get RX up here. Noise reduction. Okay, cool. So I get to my noise reduction here, and you can see I've got a great suite of things. I've got RX breath control, declick, declip, decrackle, DS, dehum, deplosive, de-reverb. I've got mouth click, I've got spectral denoise, which is the greatest of all. And I've got these, this is our suite of tools that we have available to us from the plugin suite area of things, which is kind of cool. So we can just sort of access these fairly easily. So if I want to just de-click these, and I probably would go for de-clicking here. Let's just say I want to de-click from here to here. Click on that. So here's my de-clicker, and it's pretty straightforward. I got sensitivity. I've got a couple of different algorithms I can try out if this first one doesn't work out. I'm not sure what frequency skew happens. Click widening. I'm not sure what happens. I would just sort of start tweaking these things if it didn't work out. So let's try it. Let's hear it with this. Let's bypass it. See, there's the pops. But if I just put this thing across the board with this sensitivity, which is pretty good, I guess we could up the sensitivity a little bit, unbypass it. They're gone. Daddy gone. That's one of the great things about RX is these things just work almost perfectly when you just pull them out of the box. They just do what they're supposed to do. And let's just sort of look at how this looks with our regular RX, because actually I happen to have the standalone, and I kind of prefer working with RX with the standalone version, where you can, yes, you can do this in the plug-in world, but you can really enjoy it in this world where you plug it into the standalone. You can see the whole deal here. I can see what those pops are. And you can see right there, there's that. There's the pop. Boom, right there. That thing. So if I really wanted to get rid of it in this world, I'd highlight it like so. And make sure I've got both my left and right, because it's in both of them. I could highlight that. Let me get a little more on each side of it. Oh, you too. You too. And I go over here on this side. I go to my declip, my declick. I pull this page up and I go, okay, yeah, let's do that. And render it. Watch this. Boom! And everything else is still there, but it just went away. Here, put it back. That was what was there before. We just did that. And bango, gone. So yes, this works for this kind of sort of pops kind of stuff. Anything that's a problematic that needs to be removed of that nature. But it also works for frequencies. We can do it with hum. We can do it the other way. We can pick one of these frequencies that we don't like, because we have 100 here all the way up to 20K. If you have 60 cycle hum, if we go for the de-hum, we can get rid of the hum. The de-hummer gets rid of the hum. You got some hum on your guitar? You got 60 cycle hum. Is it 50 cycle hum because you're in Europe? 60 cycle hum? Okay, 60 cycle hum. It'll get the harmonics of that hum as well. So yeah, any kind of guitar problems you have, if you had an electric guitar that was a little bit hummy, put this guy on there, bam, gone. Your tone is still there, pretty much. I mean, it might take a little teeny bit of the tone out, not much. What's really cool though is this thing called the spectral denoise and spectral repair, which I really believe in. And this is something we can use, for instance, if we like have a bunch of noise at the beginning of this tune, for instance. And let's get zooming in over here. Let's like just hear this. And that's just atmospheric noise. That's obviously, you can see there's some clicks and pops, but there's also just this atmospheric noise. What I can do is I can take a snapshot of that, and I can get rid of that for the whole track. So I'll do that. I'll go to spectral denoise, and I'll pull this thing up here, and I'll hit learn. And this will then learn that noise. And now I can go to the rest of this tune. Let me zoom back out again. And I just have a small excerpt of it right here. I can coat the rest of this thing, and I can say, all right, I want to denoise that. Render. And then ostensibly that should have what happened. That should be the noise is in this area. Let's undo that. So what I could do is I can get rid of just a lot of the general hiss noise in here. I can get rid of the pops and crackles. I can go in and get frequencies and general frequency ranges that are problematic. And I can get specific frequencies, ranges. I can deal with those areas. If I say I want to mess around from 1K to 500, I need to do some so I can do things in time. I can do things in frequency. RX, man, it's pretty much where you can fix all kinds of problems. And you can see there's this whole, here, let me move my guy out of the way here. There's this whole wonderful menu of things we can do to fix just about anything. I could go down this. I can spend the whole classes talking about this. See, one of the things that we probably want to also make sure that we're not doing and sort of fixing ahead of ourselves, we don't have to try to fix it later, is just making sure that we don't have overages. You'll probably notice that you'll have a track going and you'll see some red flickering up every now and then, and you're probably going to say to yourself, I don't really hear that. And you probably don't really hear that. But at the same time, you kind of do, and it's still something that you want to avoid, because once you hit that red, there's no going past it. And anything that was supposed to go past that and make a point is not going to make that point anymore. So the thing that you want to do is avoid the overages. That's why we really sort of got crazy about getting with clip gain in the Samsara mixes. We didn't even touch our faders yet. We just make sure that all of our clip gain keeps coming down, and we can keep everything down to a good level. Because what we want to do once we get to the point where we have all this stuff in the mix now, and we're going to be starting to push the upper levels, things are going to start to get to the overage areas. So at this point, once we have a bunch of the instruments in, pretty much all the instruments, we now want to go ahead and have some sort of a limiter or a stereo bus compressor across our submix. I have to start thinking already now that my mix has to still, before I even get to a mastering point, it still has to be under the -14 LUFS that I'm going to be having to deal with for streaming, for any kind of services that is going to happen. I still need to worry about my levels for mastering for iTunes, because yes, we master for CDs and for vinyl nowadays, but mostly we master for downloads and streaming. And so we have to prioritize that and realize there are rules for that. When you have overages in that world, they send it back and you have to fix it so it doesn't have overages. We have to start taking this very seriously. So I'm going to go back to the Samsara mix, and I'm going to introduce my first major limiter stereo bus compressor. So here it is, and I'm going to turn this on. I've got just the good old ozone maximizer. It's bypassed right now, but the first thing that I did, I went ahead and I set my ceiling on my ozone maximizer to -1 dB, because I already know that true peaks in all my true peaks in all my formats that I'm going to be dealing with mastering for iTunes, for streaming, for Spotify, for everything. That's the limit. I can't have my true peaks going over -1.0 dB. Can't do it. So I've got to make sure that's already happening. So with the ozone, if you do that, you also have to make sure that this true peak is in blue mode. So right off the bat, I'm going to set my ceiling pretty much hard on this. So I'm not going to get anything past this. So what that means is I also want to make sure that as I'm bringing stuff into the mix further, if I start hearing this really brick up my transients, I'm going to have to come back. I'm going to have to come back into my song. I'm going to have to bring down levels. That's why I'm really trying to be cool with my clip gain. I've got a threshold then I can set. I'm going to start with this up here by the ceiling. I don't want to squish this too much yet. Again, I want to leave some room for mastering It's just a good idea to do that, because when you have a bunch of different other tunes living together in a situation, you want your mastering to do that. I'm still thinking like I'm making albums. Gosh, I'm so old-fashioned. Aren't I cute? Listen to this, and we're also going to hear it go into the loud section and see what happens with our levels. And I'm going to sort of mess with this threshold as it goes. You can really hear what these are the program material. And you're just going to have to set that to your taste. I mean, you're going to have to listen to this music and sort of see if when you pull it really down hard on that threshold, is it starting to really just sort of distort the mix too much. It's very, very tempting to really pull that thing down, because it brings up the RMS of the whole mix, and it just makes things louder. When things sound louder, what does that mean? They sound better. I want to make sure that this ceiling is set so that I'm not going to go past this point, and that I'm not going to have overages that I have to deal with later in the mastering process and down the road. So this is fixing something before I fix it. But this is a stage that we get to once we get all of our instruments into a mix. We need to start introducing this, because this is going to now be the bar which we will no longer be able to go past. And if we start really hearing this compressor doing stuff to it, our mix, we have to address that. We don't want to necessarily flatten out all of our transients, and we want to keep things still to have texture and movement. A maximizer, a compressor is a good way to go with this. This particular one, the Ozone, is a great tool for this job, because here's what we have on the other side of this. Eventually, you're going to be seeing, we're going to be talking about this very soon. I'm not going to get into this a lot right now. We're going to be seeing this loudness meter. And this is where we're going to be ultimately really setting our levels for what happens in the real world, because this number right here has to be -4. Can't get past -14. And I'm still safe right now. Okay, so that's enough about talking about getting everything fixing before the mix. Fixing in the mix, we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit as we continue the Making the Mix series. Thanks for your time.